Well, hello there, and welcome to day 107 of A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. And we are now deep into the horror theme of the week, and I've decided to take a delve back to one of the foundational pillars of the horror genre with the 1978 John Carpenter classic, Halloween. As I've mentioned in The Shining, there are certain staples of horror, and foundations, you might say, in terms of any respected horror aficionado will have had to have seen a set, some of these films. Now, as I mentioned at the time, that the films that are what you might call the best foundation horrors, according to I took that from the Cinefix list, or at least their reference to what the top 5 horror films are, which were Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Exorcist, Alien, The Shining, and Silence of the Lambs. Now, I don't entirely agree with that list in terms of defining terms, partly because the outlier, at least to me, is Silence of the Lambs, which came out, of course, in the 90s. And a lot of these films, to me, need to be foundational, that all the tropes and styles that we use today are defined by these films. So, of course, you could go further back to more classic horror of, the Draculas and the Frankensteins and the Nosferatus and the mummies of the 30s and 40s, but they don't really define the tropes of horror as we understand them now in a direct way. Of course they do, but not in the palpable way that some of these films have. So as I say, for me, my horror foundations would include films like, so my list would probably be The Exorcist, The Shining, Psycho, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Alien, maybe replacing Psycho with The Thing, even though ostensibly The Thing and Alien both cover the same ground. There is flexibility in that. However, there are so many others, including Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, just these, even the slightly older The Haunting, of course, which led to The Haunting of Hill House, and the the definition of the ghost story as we understand it in film. However, again, like I say, you can constantly Rolodex these films of ones, but a smattering of them, in your mind, you need to have a clear definition of what those films are. And I imagine in a lot of cases, when it comes to exploring the subgenre of the slasher film, John Carpenter's Halloween is defining, really. And this is where a confession has to come into play, because until tonight, I had never seen the original John Carpenter's Halloween in its full, I've seen clips. I have quite a extensive knowledge of the Halloween franchise. I've seen sections of different films within the series, but I had never watched the original from the beginning to end in a way that I can say this is the film, which I've done with most of the ones that I've mentioned in that list. Now, slashers aren't really something that I'm that interested in. I love horror, but slashers have never really been a subgenre that's particularly interested me. And so that's perhaps partly a reason why I've not stayed away from, but I've not particularly had interest in watching this film. But as I'm doing this series and as I'm doing the horror theme, to me it only made sense to finally check off this as I say, staple, foundational classic. And I have to say, in that definition, there is something, yes, there is something defining about it. It might not be the first of its genre in this time, but there's something about it that really shapes the genre. And of course, if we're talking about foundations, if we look at the Mount Rushmore of horror directors, John Carpenter, of course, would have to be one of them. And you credit him with the fact that though Halloween is a fairly straightforward slasher conceit, which is a murderer, a psychopath, escapes from an asylum and kills teens, and you think, okay, therefore we're going to have the same archetypal characters that you would get in any slasher film. The plot will come out quite straightforward, and it's going to do all the things that Scream, of course, later in the 90s would call back to as what defines a slasher horror. However, in saying that, that's a very superficial reading of this film, because again, this is John Carpenter, and he really goes to task to try and give this a sense of definition and complexity. If you look at the opening 7 minutes, and I've seen these opening 7 minutes before, but I strongly believe that that's a fantastic short film. Where we see a child Michael Myers, though we don't know it, through his own POV as he kills his sister. Or babysitter, I actually can't remember which one. I think it is a babysitter, I don't think it's his sister. But anyway, and of course the reveal at the end is as he takes his mask. We break away from the POV as his parents come home. He takes a mask off and he's a child, like 8 perhaps. And then we jump 15 years to present day of the film, which is 1978, and the film starts. But that opening section is treated with such care and attention, and there are hokey things about it, but it's in terms of the message it's trying to get across, it really calls back to films like Peeping Tom, which and puts the audience in the perspective of the killer, and we have certain expectations of what we think the killer is, and those are being subverted in a way that we perhaps now we would say, oh well, obviously it's X, Y, and Z, but frankly it for the time really subverts expectations of what you think is going on. And then you get into the main body of the film, and frankly, like with anything, you might have a very standard plot, a very standard breakdown of narrative, and yet the work really comes into the level of detail and attention and depth you can give to your setting and your characters and a style of cinematography, and it has all these things. I mean, to sort of step away from the film and look more at the franchise, or from a franchise perspective, I mean, every detail of the Halloween original film has created a lore that has extended further into sequels. I mean, we have, of course, Laurie, who is our main protagonist for the first 2-3 films, and then comes back for H2O, and then Halloween Resurrection, and then comes back again for this new revamp version that came out from 2017 and will continue on. But then you have, you have characters like Ben Tramer, who is a character we don't ever even see, who has his own lore, and people talk about Ben Tramer and his relationship. And this is a character whose name is mentioned 3 times. Or you have Tommy Doyle, the charge, the little boy that Laurie's looking after. And of course, he goes into to sequels later on, and huge amounts of lore build into this, frankly, very straightforward serial killer or this spree killer story where, you know, I mean, when you get into later sequels, the plot becomes about trying to justify and explain what is going on. So you have things like, in later sequels, we have Laurie's daughter who has psychic powers, or we have cults who actually created Michael Myers in terms of like manipulating his brain or his soul, and 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 so you have this constant turning over of what the meaning of this. I mean, Rob Zombie, of course, did his remake 2 films and tried to give it a very Rob Zombie redneck kind of slant to justify why Michael became the way he was. But at the core of the film, it's about the diversion between the fact that we have this very gentle suburban setting with characters who have their interplay, and we get to know them and their drama, and then we have this unrelenting, unfeeling killer who just waits and watches. And the film, to its great credit, takes its time. We see his character wandering around from a distance. I mean, we very seldom see Michael Myers in a clear way when he's got a mask off in the foreground. It's very much from a distance, through his POV again, or we have the mask version of him. And the film spends a long stretch of us just being around the characters of Laurie, Annie, Linda, and they're into drama with boys and the little children that they're looking after, and it sets up this small town where nothing really happens. And the only thing that drives it is the fact that we as an audience know Michael is there watching and preparing, and the fact we have his first Dr. Loomis, who sets all of this up, and he really builds the character of Michael. He really sets up what we're going to be expecting. I mean, you have that great sequence where he talks about the fact that he spent 7 years trying to understand Michael and 8 years trying to keep him locked away. And the way that he talks about Michael as this dead-eyed shark. And this is the thing about the Michael Myers character, and why we have this extensive lore and all these different characters who interact with him for generations, and remakes and backstories. In the same way, I suppose, as you have with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And Leatherface's character is unknowable, and he fits into the horror structure of the unknowable mind. And so in that respect, he has more in common with Jaws or Alien than he does, or the film has more in common with Jaws or Alien and him with the Bruce the Shark and the Xenomorph than he does with any other slasher villains, or anything where we have a sense of their motives and we have a sense of what their rules are. He is simply a human embodiment of death, and Loomis goes to great tasks to try to set that up. I mean, you have the Laurie Loomis Michael dichotomy, and if you're going to go back into horror history, you have that sense that Loomis, despite the fact that he's a doctor, really he may as well be the Van Helsing to Michael Myers' Dracula, or the priest to Michael Myers' devil, with Michael Myers being the embodiment of evil, Loomis being sort of the embodiment of the knowledgeable. It's not really a hero, but the one who is trying to, the knowing character, the one with the knowledge, and of course Laurie being the innocent, the Mina Harker or the Regan of the story. And so in that respect, there is a lot of layers and depths to this, and I can understand why later films have tried to unpack it and done the weird cult stuff with I think it's Halloween 5, or the backstory stuff that Rob Zombie tries to do, because our desire is to want to understand what motivates and what creates a monster like a Michael Myers. But the point of this film is we cannot know. We do not know. We cannot know. He is just this way. In the same way, we could never understand why Bruce the shark is. I mean, Bruce the shark, we assume kills to eat, and yet the ferocity, the viciousness by which he does it implies something malevolent, and the same with the xenomorph. And therefore we can understand on some level what their super objective is, but we cannot understand why they do the things the way they do and why they victimize the way they do. And as I say, this film does a great balance between setting that up and just setting up really nice bunch of characters who, frankly, you like. I mean, I do like Linda and Annie as the sort of silly sidekicks to Laurie as they're, goofing off and trying to hook up and cavorting like teenagers. And of course, you have the archetype of Laurie being the innocent, the pure one. And yet, and so then when we get to their killings, it's actually quite like, you actually do care that one by one, each one of them is killed until Laurie is left. And you actually do, have that sense of, that there is something to be said about the fact that it's like, we had enough time to sort of get to know these characters that when they're killed, and they're killed very bloodlessly, that's something else. I mean, it's not sorry, I'm being hyperbolic when I say bloodlessly. It's not, for what slashers do, and it's not quite to the level of Texas Chainsaw where there is no blood, and the trick of Texas Chainsaw is tricking us as an audience into thinking there's blood, but there is never blood. We do see the kills on screen with Michael, but frankly, they're quite sedate. And that's something else about the film, is the fact that Michael picks off characters one after the other in a very sedate, straightforward way. Whatever the quickest, simplest way is the way that he will do it. I mean, there is an exception where he slightly toys with Linda, hiding under a sheet and pretending to be her boyfriend who he's just killed. But frankly, yeah, he lumbers slowly towards his victims and just simply dispatches them. And again, that gives you that embodiment of death. He is death incarnate, who is just coming to deal out his duty. If there's anything wasn't so keen on with the film, when you get to the very end of the film, where Laurie confronts Michael, which is frankly very close towards the end of the film, we're talking the last 15 minutes. Unfortunately, Laurie, though played really well by Jamie Lee, Jamie Lee Collins? Has my brain gone to mush? But, this is a very young, early career actress. Jamie Lee Curtis, sorry. This is a young, Jamie Lee Curtis is a fantastic actor who's gone on to have a great career. But this is a, very early stage Jamie Lee Curtis. And when she's working with the other actors, she's fantastic. She really shows ability and range. But when he gets to the bit where she's going to the house and finding bodies, and then is being confronted by Michael, long stretches of this final section involve her having to act against nothing and nobody. And if there's any part that doesn't work for me, it's when she has no one to play off, when she's calling out to her friends, when she's walking around the house, or when she's fleeing Michael and trying to get back in. There's something a little muted about it, and a little bit, like I said, it feels like Jamie Lee Curtis doesn't have a great deal to sort of play off. But other than that, again, she is phenomenal, as is Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis. They are a great three, and then with the supporting cast, It is a really well structured film. Yeah, I'm very impressed with it. I mean, of course it is an impressive film. You know, it is a classic for a reason, and yeah, I completely understand structurally why it defines the genre as it did, and of course you can chart a path from Halloween straight to Scream, but with that being said, it still has such a vivid, well-made structure to it, and identity to it. So yeah, I'm very impressed. I'm not going to be working my way through them because, frankly, I'm too well aware of the Halloween sequels and weird direction they go. But I may, in the near future, look at the most recent revival with the Halloween 2017, which of course dismisses all of the sequels barring this one. And I think that seems like a good place to sort of connect up, but that'll be some way down the road. I think I'm going to leave myself a little bit of a gap. But yeah, phenomenal. And of course, John Carpenter. The Thing is one of my favourite films of all time, so I don't know why I would be surprised by this. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I have over 100 videos now to go through, so please take a look at any that might take your fancy if you've liked this one. You can follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I am tweeting movie trailers and movie news and funny videos, and of course links to uploads when they go up on YouTube. Thank you for joining me. Take care.